What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the infamous project. It is interesting weather here today in Texas. In fact, I needed to try and move as much stuff as possible inside the shop because, well, we're on tornado watch. The eclipse passed through yesterday, and I guess, you know, the weather just wants to carry on being extra strange, but gonna carry on and getting work done anyways, even if it's inside, well, sheltered out of the rain, which is good. But we got the 93 electric current red former race car in the garage here. And if you remember where we left off in the last video, the car fired like momentarily, and that was pretty much the end of it. So after that, you guys haven't missed much. You know, I did pour a little bit of fuel down the carburetor and it would fire up for a little bit of time, and that was it. So I pulled the fuel pump off, and I've actually got some footage of going through, and I pulled the pump apart after a lot of, I guess, frustration, you know, trying to get the brushes back in position and everything else. And then I had to fill it up with WD-40. And then after it sat for some time, and I just kept shocking it with 12 volts, and eventually it started spinning. Back on the electric current here. So I'm actually going to pull the gas tank out of the car. I'm going to pull the pump off that bracket, try and open it up, see if I can't bring that back to life. And gonna see. I had another sump tank somewhere, so I need to try and either find it or come up with another solution to deliver fuel more reliably to the carburetor. So let's get this tank out first. Then we'll mess around again. We'll try pouring some fuel down the carb again and seeing if this thing will fire up. Oh, yeah, that's nasty in there. I don't know if you guys can see that. Trying to let the sun shine in there. GoPro's probably blocking it. There you go, maybe. See a little bit of it. Whew. Like I said, that smells like no other. So a couple things to note under here. There's the old support bag and the drag spring. So old it is completely like cracked and deteriorated. In fact, there's a piece of it laying on the ground there. Stock fuel line still here. All right. Rear bumper support is gone. Well, you can see how clean it is up in here. No rot whatsoever. And oh, this is kind of cool. Little fill plug up there, I guess. So you don't have to go through the backside. And so you got some solid Heim joint style upper control arms. Well, it still has the carrier bushings are still there. There's our lovely dump exhaust. But yeah, nice and clean otherwise. All right, so that's out. That's out. We'll open that up in a minute. But yeah, guys, let's play under the hood again. I'll pull this battery out of here. So maybe. you guys go. She's a runner. It runs. We managed to do that part. So now figure out the fuel tank situation, fuel pump situation. In fact, I'm going to start ripping that pump apart right now. And there we have it. I even managed to, like, once it was idling, sort of, I peeked over here, the tach was working. And yeah, I think everything kind of works on the car. So we'll see what we're going to do about this fuel tank right here, clean up our mess. And like I said, let's start opening up this fuel pump. You can see we can get access to it. Open this up. We'll put some power to it and we'll see if we can't revive it. Definitely need a new fuel filter. There's no way in hell that that's going to have any flow through it. And we'll go from there. Brushes are still good. Give it a little bit more WD-40. So the trick here is we got to sneak these brushes back into these little brush holders. There we go. One. It's reminding me of rebuilding the intercooler pump on my Lightning. Brushes are actually in good shape. So the pump has been saved. Amazingly enough, this is the fuel tank that came out of the car, and took it to get vatted, and it took 3 different shops before somebody was willing to take this on. And I think the only reason why they took this on is because they were big Ford fans, and they pretty much said they'd never seen a tank so bad before in the history of their operation. It had, I believe, 17 pounds of like that slimy goo and crystals at the bottom of it from that race fuel that sat over the past 20 years. So it's clean. Put a new used fuel level sending unit in there. And it's interesting when you look at this underneath the cover. All right, so you can see the sump down there, but you see where they beat that in with a hammer? And my thoughts on the reasoning why they did that was to make sure that all the fuel would go down towards the sump, right? So that way there'd be no old fuel possibly pooling up on this portion of the tank, to make sure that everything would go down on an angle like that. I could be wrong with my assumption. Maybe they were just trying to make it so it could take less fuel. But that's what I think, and that's what I'm going with. So got the fittings back on, fittings taped up. I've blown compressed air through the main fuel line going up to the front to the fuel pressure regulator. And the inside of this thing is actually, it's squeaky clean. I don't know if the GoPro is gonna pick up on that. It's usually pretty good about things in the dark, but yeah, guys, you can actually see metal again in there. Again, if you can't see it, my apologies. But yeah, so kudos to the shop. They managed to get that done. We got Lewis visiting all the way from Florida, and he is working on some cooling stuff, and this is a hell of a story that I'm not going to put in a video. In fact, this is going to be a conversation on the podcast. So if you guys don't listen to the podcast, Roll Into My 5.0, check it out. Spotify, Apple Pods, or whatever it is on Apple platform. And you guys will be able to hear the story about this and my own personal mess up. Well, somebody else messed up and I followed suit, right? Sometimes we assume things, and that's, I always say it, never assume anything. And then, well, sometimes I assume stuff and it comes back and bites you in the ass. So with that said, we're going to get the fuel tank back in this guy and the fuel pump mounted in the back. We have a can of fuel over there with octane boost, because we got to keep in mind this car was probably running 110 octane. So we've got about 100 with the VP octane boost. I'll show you guys that in a minute. And but yeah, let's get everything plugged back in here and bolted back up, and we'll purge the system through a little bit. I've left the line off underneath the hood, and we'll get some fuel flowing. And ultimately, we don't know what that carburetor is going to do, but fingers crossed we can get it to at least run on its own without pouring fuel down the top of the carburetor. So fuel system is all back in. I've wired up the pump that was just butt connected before. So I had to cut it off, and I guess I could have checked the power because we still don't know if that's by a switch in the front, but fingers crossed everything is going to work. So that is a cheapy Evil Energy fuel filter that got off of Amazon, obviously for proof of concept here. And seeing if everything works. I still got a drip pan underneath things, so I'm going to go ahead. I did pour a little bit of fuel in just to kind of flush whatever might have been at the bottom of the fuel tank, but in reality it should have been clean from the tank getting cleaned. Here is the additive that went in, increases 8 numbers up to 80 points, so making power. So we're going to pour, we've already put half of this because it treats up to 5 gallons. So that's in there. Pour it in, make sure we don't have any leaks. Try and purge the pump at the line going up to the fuel pressure regulator in the front. So see if we can pump some fuel through. Once we get fuel up there, then we'll connect that, and then it should be sending fuel to the carburetor. Our fuel's in the car, not on the ground. Got this line off over here into a Powerade bottle. So Lewis is going to be monitoring that. I'm going to see if one of these switches turns on that pump. Oh, I guess we need keys. Keys. Oh, I hear it.
Nothing's come up. There it is.
Yeah, it's going to take a while.
Looks pretty clean. Surprisingly.
It should be. I got everything all cleaned out. Okay, let me purge just a little bit more.
Got it.
Okay, I don't see any leaks back here. Just good. All right, exciting times. So I'm just going to clean up my mess. While Lewis tightens up those lines at the regulator, we'll wheel the car outside. See if we can get this thing to fire on, stay running on its own. gonna try and get it so we'll actually idle on its own. I did find out, oddly enough, what the one button in the console does. In order to start the car, you actually have to hold that red button down. It will not fire even though the motor is cranking, and even though so if you hit this button in the engine bay, the car will run. If you just try and use the ignition, it will not run unless you hold that button down. It's the weirdest contraption. I'm sure it's probably some race regulation stuff. Try a bit more. That spring over time doesn't look like a spring, like it looks like it would stretch and lose its integrity. That's what I'm going with.
That springs up the compression.
I think it's awesome that that pump works. Well, there you have it, guys. It runs. Doesn't want to stay running. I'm sure there's probably some dialing in, fine-tuning, carburetor being old, but you know, it's squirting fuel and doing all the right things. I think from a wide open throttle perspective, you could probably manage to send it, but yeah, it'd be nice to know that everything's warming up and doing everything as it should before trying to do anything crazy. So I'm gonna let it sit, move on to another project, and then we'll circle back to this and see what we can make happen.